Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com.
Howdy.
Wow. All right, and we are back. Jill wanted to say howdy to everybody. I hope you guys heard that. Normally you hear my obnoxious voice to start it off, so hey y'all. I really need a new thing, because I'll always be like, all right, we're back, or all right, hey y'all, or
you haven't done hey y'all in a while.
All right, I'm gonna start that, and just
I feel like, was that a YouTube thing?
That was a YouTube thing. I would always start every video with hey y'all. So all right, we're gonna start the podcast with that. Next one, it's happening.
Well, I'm here,
so we're with Coach Jill.
Hi, howdy. How are you doing?
Oh God.
I'm
Sending up the smoke signals for help.
Oh yeah, help. Just if you're on the YouTube channel, you'll see.
All right, done being silly. So today's podcast is actually a really, really good topic, and I'm super excited about this one because I think that it's really relevant for everybody listening, but particularly people who are, this would apply to everything. We're going to, of course, put it in our specific lens, but this goes for all things in life, right? Like any kind of job that you're in or whatever. But it's how to be coachable. And this is important for everybody. This is important for clients to coaches, coaches to coaches, you in a situation like with, family, friends, and other work, like literally everything.
Mentor, mentee, is that the word?
You're like Mentos? Is
Mentos.
And you're like, I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Totes. It's Totes Mentos. Wow. Totes. Okay.
Totes my goats.
How to be coachable. I should take a how to speak better English class apparently, because
sometimes when I send videos to clients, like I trip up on words or like I say something really weird, I'm like, you know what, English is just not working for me today or any day.
All right, serious confession. I really struggle with then and van.
Van.
Like like an or en.
I just struggle with R words.
And no, not like saying it, but writing it.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's one of those things.
They just interchange all the time.
Yeah, one time somebody called me out on it on a story, and like I've never been the same since. And because I was like, oh my God, that's so stupid. And I was like, oh my God, do I do this all the time? And I don't know. Or so the way that we do our check-ins, it's like this combo of like Word and Excel, but there's not spell check on it, right? No. Which
sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does, but like
not though.
Big fuck ups, you're like, hey, why didn't you do this? But so I try to proofread it and make sure that it looks right, but there's certain words, like, because I'll write a lot like circadian rhythm, and rhythm,
I hate that word.
How do you spell rhythm?
I fucking hate it.
Or plateau. I don't know how to say plateau.
Well, it's so random because I went through this like mini phase with like my check-ins where I just started adding S's to the end of some words where it doesn't belong. So like digestions, I'm like, that's not what I meant. But why does my finger keep just gravitating toward the S for some reason? So I would go back and just double check. I'm like, no stray S's are here, are there? Right? Okay, we're good.
How's the trainings going? I was like, what? How are your squats?
How are the moves this week?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but
didn't we say we were going off on a tangent at some point? But that was probably for the next.
That was for the next podcast, but we started a tangent on this one.
Yeah,
good.
I mean, we're overachievers here, so
we have a whole outline. We're not following it. No, we're getting back to it. We actually haven't even started.
No, we haven't.
Let's start it. We're not going back. We're actually just starting the list. So first, on how to be coachable. And again, we're going to present this in the lens of a client to a coach, like with what we do. But again, you can apply this any way that you want. So first and foremost is honesty. We can only go off of what you are telling us. And that sounds very obvious. And a lot of these things are kind of overlapping, but they do have distinctions.
Yeah, they kind of just interchange with each other sometimes, so.
But, it's really important because, you could be saying to us, hey, this is working really, really great. But in reality, it's not. And we are online coaches, so there are a handful of clients that we are very lucky that we get to see every once in a while, but we don't get to see people every day. We don't get to see them every week. We don't, we don't live with them, obviously. Let's clear that up.
Like Lauren popping out of like the garbage disposal,
hey, what the fuck are you doing? And so we're not around our clients all the time.
Oh yeah.
And, even if we were, so say we were in like a personal trainer in person, and you get to see somebody once a week, even if somebody could lie, not like they're trying to be like this, deceitful person.
I went to the gym like 3 other days this week, but if I'm only seeing you once a week, then
how do I know that? Or you go to a different gym, or so it's not like I could even check up on that.
Or you're telling me something on the sheet or reporting something when in reality, outside of the check-in, that's not the case. There are some people who, hey, I'm doing this amount of cardio this week, but then maybe a few weeks later they're like, oh, actually I haven't been doing that. It's like, okay, well, this is important information to know. Because I've been making changes based on the information that I'm given.
And as a coach, you can only make changes based on what you know. So this is important not just for what is working, so that we can continue to do things that are working, but it's really important for things that are not working. And that sounds pretty obvious, but it really, like the cardio one is a great example. So say somebody's in a fat loss phase, right? And you have a certain amount of cardio prescribed, and everything else on the sheet seems to be going good, but they're not really dropping, and you made some cardio changes, but then they're not reflecting those changes, and then you're like, all right, well, maybe we'll make a diet change now because clearly this isn't enough. And these are normal things. We can make changes, and somebody might not drop anyway. But
knowing that the information we're looking at and the feedback that we're getting is accurate and actually happening, that's where the issue is if that information is false. Because if you're not able to hit whatever cardio we're prescribing, and then you tell me you are, and then I add more cardio, like we have an issue there with adherence or something going on where this change isn't really going to make any difference.
No, and then we could be changing the wrong variable, because you think, all right, well, cardio's here, but maybe it's food, or maybe it's the meal timing, or maybe it's your training, but really in reality it was like this whole other piece that we just didn't even know about. And this happens too with people who are maybe we push clients a lot with things like untracked meals and really adding in some flexibility. And some people, if they're not, they could be like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this great, and you're like, oh, okay, like again, I'm going off of your feedback that you're
giving. Let's have another
one. And then you find out that they weren't even doing that first one properly, or they were having severe anxiety around it and just didn't tell you. And you're like, all right, well, we have to know what is working and what isn't. And we'll get down to kind of something else that ties into that too. But so honesty is really, really important. And that kind of goes and shifts into open communication. So they are one and the same, but they're slightly different. So I think that, one, obviously honesty is pretty obvious and self-explanatory. Okay, I did this or I didn't do that. You're just laying out.
I'm hitting these targets, I'm doing X, Y, and Z.
Or I didn't do or whatever, right? Like that's the honesty part. The open communication is a little bit deeper than that. So yes, you're being honest about what you're doing, but you're also feeling comfortable expressing your goals or your changes in goals. And I think that that's probably the most common thing that we see with clients, is they might shift their goals or their focus, or they might want to try something different. But if you didn't express that to a coach, it would be really hard for the coach to make those changes.
Yeah, especially, online platform or not, we can't read anyone's mind, right? So the information we're processing through the check-in, I can't read between the lines there either. So if something's not being expressed, then, I can't go off of, how you're feeling, really. So, after the fact, down the road, if you're like, oh, well, actually, I felt this way about X, Y, and Z, I wish I had known that sooner, right?
Because then we would have made changes. Because we're not hung up on a certain goal or a certain target. We're hung up on what is going to get you the best results, and we need to work together with that. It's not about something that we have, hey, we want to do things this one certain way. If you guys listen to the podcast or you are a client, you know that, but if you don't tell somebody that, it we're going to continue to say the same message.
Yeah,
because
especially if like your goals change and
Yes.
you feel the need, like, oh, you know what, I can't work with you anymore because I have these other goals. Well, this is something we can totally talk about. If I had known that you were feeling this way a few weeks ago, like, we could have made changes about that, sooner.
Could have added
there's
things,
nothing we
tracked
can't.
things.
Yeah, there's nothing we can't really adapt to as coaches, especially since we work with a wide range of clients. Some of them like tracking, some of them like more intuitive eating. There's different methods that we can use for clients.
There's so many methods, and there's not one right way. So that's where that open communication is really, really key. And now, obviously, as a coach, you develop a way of reading between the lines better, meaning, we've developed the check-in sheet to kind of have those things in place, right? Because if somebody could, sure, go in and not be truthful, but it would be really hard, right? Because like things slip through, of course, but like we're asking a lot of detailed questions. We're, looking at different measures, and generally speaking, people will put something in there that will, make us go, okay, wait, let's touch on that. Yeah. And it's not like we're just like, hey, how was your week? Then that would be really, really easy for people to not be able to communicate. But when we're asking all these different types of questions and we're getting qualitative and quantitative feedback, we can see and ask questions better, which can then kind of open things up. And that goes also to the part of the open communication. You can't be scared to talk to your coach. And I think that that's something that's really, really common, and especially with people who've come from maybe a bad coaching situation. Usually most people, if it's your first online coach, you maybe aren't somebody who is necessarily scared or has these kind of reservations. But if you've had a coach before and it was a bad experience, or you asked questions, or you asked about, changing stuff, and then you got scolded or yelled at, and we hear that all the time. That's not a fake thing. Like, that is a real thing where people
are like, oh, just, execute the plan, and, you shouldn't have to ask questions. Well, you should ask questions. You have to be, not only is it good for your education long term, but you can advocate for yourself and ask why you're doing certain things. It's not enough to just say like, oh, well, someone told me to do this, so I'm just gonna obviously trust them. Like, maybe you should ask some questions if you have some, reservations from a past experience. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah,
and we encourage that. And again, that's part of the check-in process for us, is detailed in that way so that people can express those kinds of things and feel open. Like, it's basically an open invitation to say, all right, we're asking you all these things because we want feedback here. So we're trying to be as open as possible just from the get-go so people feel comfortable doing it. But there are still people who are scared to ask things, or scared to say, oh, I don't like that recommendation, can we try something else? Because ultimately, it's not hurting our feelings, right?
No.
If I say, hey, you're dealing with, maybe some kind of digestive issue, or you're dealing with some kind of like meal timing issue, here's a suggestion that I would have. Why don't we try that for a few weeks? And we might try it and it might not work. And that is okay. I don't give two fucks if it works or not. What I care about is that you're getting the result, or we're fixing whatever is not working.
Yeah.
So if we try something for a few weeks and it doesn't work, don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't like this, or hey, this didn't work. It's all good. I just want you to, you have to express that.
As the coach is to get you from point A to point B, C, D, wherever you're aiming to go. So if we have to be a little bit more open-minded and try a different, method to get there, really communicating is part of that.
A huge part of it. Now, another one that is kind of its own standalone thing, but it is very important for coaching, is patience. So this is the hardest part, for sure. Of really, I would say that any kind of process, no matter what kind of change it is, whether it's a dietary change or a training change or a habit change or a physique change, whatever it is, most of the good changes are going to take longer than we'd like. And obviously, if you guys have listened to any podcast on here before, you know that, and that's what we preach. And it really is because it is the most important aspect of it. We never lie to people and say, hey, we're going to get you there in 8, 12, 16 weeks. Like, probably not. Especially if it's been, many years of something. You're not just going to get there overnight. But as part of being coachable, you have to have that patience with the coach, because what most people expect is that, they are trying to go from this point A, and they're really ready and invested to put all of their effort into something for this short period of time. So they expect these fast changes, and it's like, it doesn't matter if you give 80 or 90 or 100%, it's still going to take time. Like now, if you put in more effort and you're more diligent, will you get there faster? Yes. But there's only so much speed that can be involved in this process.
Yeah. There's no, fast forward button, especially, if you're giving that 90, 100%, everyone's going to progress at a different rate. So, we can't make unrealistic promises to clients, especially, just looking out for your long-term goals pretty much. Our goal is to get you there, of course, but we can't make any promises as to how long that will take.
No, and let's use 2 examples. So for, a competition prep client, right, this inevitably, leads to some kind of timeline because people, need to make a show at some point.
Yeah. But at some point we dial that in.
Yeah, at some point you're like, all right, like we're going to narrow the focus. But when most people are starting to prep, it's like, all right, this might be our time frame that we can compete in. If you've worked with somebody before or, you know their body. But generally speaking, it's like, all right, we're just going to kind of start this prep. I have a lot of clients this year that I worked with last year who are starting to prep now with me this year, who I've never worked with before in a contest prep setting. So I don't know how long it's going to take, right? Like they're like, oh, I'm like, right, here's the list of these shows and we can aim for some of these, but I'm not going to say, okay, this is how it's going to work.
I'm not going to commit to something from the get-go.
No, because
I give them a minimum amount of time I want to diet them down for, but from there, as we get closer to that date, it's easier to, pinpoint a show.
Because best case scenario, you respond as expected or you respond quickly.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Most of the time, there's going to be things that come up, even if it's, maybe your body's stubborn for a few weeks. That happens to everybody. Maybe just like we're like, hi, call on me. Or it could be, something life circumstantially happens. Everybody has a prep where they're like, wow, something unexpected came up. And it doesn't mean that you're falling off the plan and completely just forgetting about stuff, but it is going to slow things down. So that needs to be, taken into consideration. And then of course, if you are somebody who doesn't have competition goals, this actually is even harder, I think, for the timeline, because these are the changes that are really going to take a long time. And at least with a competition, even if I said, hey, it's going to be a really hard year, you're like, all right, I know I have this big goal though, so I'm going to keep etching at it. When we're like, there's like these goals up here and they're kind of looming and big and that might take a few years, people are like, what the fuck? Like you have to give somebody some kind of short-term goal to keep them on track. But as far as kind of like the general timeline, it really does require patience, because every week is not really like
anything stellar.
No.
It's
the best
really
weeks are kind of just like, oh, everything fell into place, and you're like,
like I always kind of like to call, if we're talking like off season, right, I always say like, this is more monotonous work, just because it's really just all about maintaining those habits and hitting them consistently and doing that again and again and again. So it gets pretty boring, but that's ultimately where the changes are happening too, whether you're prep or lifestyle. So it really is all about patience there, and just, hey, keeping an eye on those long-term goals, setting some mini ones along the way, and just keeping an eye on your habits.
The boring work, is really what's most important. And we actually talked about that on the last series we did with Rick. A lot of people, like when they start therapy, like the original, what they go in there and they have, their reason that they're there, or their traumas or their past or whatever. And a lot of the beginning is just kind of explaining to somebody or the therapist, like, okay, what is going on.
It's like, let me catch you up to speed.
Exactly. And you're just kind of like getting this off your chest and you're saying all these things and you're having some mini breakthroughs and whatever. But then once you kind of get past like this why period, now you have to get into like, all right, well, what are we going to do moving forward? Because we understood what happened before, but now we have to make these changes. And that's when you're making those changes, especially to like thinking errors and the cognitive distortions. And this is the same thing here. Initially it's like, all right, here's all the stuff that we have to like deal with. Here's why you're in a certain position, kind of peeling back these layers. And then once we get into a groove, a lot of times it is more boring, but that is what actually, when you like pull your head up in a year or two, then you're like, wow, okay, I've made some like long lasting, like impactful changes, not just another 8-week diet that I gave 120% to. So that's really the most important thing, of shifting your mindset there on, how to be coachable. And then the other thing, which again kind of goes up into the other ones, is trust and open-mindedness. So we, we said, okay, you can't just blindly trust somebody, you need to ask questions, which is true, but you also have to have some level of trust.
Oh, yeah.
If you're always untrusting of a coach, then you're not really going to make any progress, because then you're always like, is this right? Should we be doing this? I read this other thing. How about this?
Yeah.
And it's like,
there's a certain balance to strike there, because, I would say there's a negative aspect of, being a little nitpicky with every moving part, but you also hired a coach for a reason to guide you throughout this process, and give you the tools that you need to really reach that end point.
And that's the point of, figuring out who to hire, and that's where, you would do something where you're like, all right, I listened to these podcasts or these videos or read these articles or I've seen these posts and I see what this team or these coaches are about. And then you kind of have a better understanding going into it. That's why we do this. We want to obviously give education to everybody, but we also want people to understand, okay, this is like what we represent. This is what we do as coaches. So then when somebody does this, hey, I've been listening to the podcast for the past 6 months, like I'm ready to sign up. They have a baseline trust in us, because they say, okay, these people are competent and they're going to put me in the right direction. Things are going to change and I don't know exactly where they're going to go. And we facilitate asking questions, but it's never because we never want people to like go into coaching, and this goes for not just us, this goes for everybody, in a very untrusting way, because then you're always kind of like on edge.
Jinx, you me son.
And being open-minded too to a different method. Maybe you've tried something in the past, we all get stuck in our specific
I feel like the most
ways.
common example of this is when I introduce someone to reverse dieting, someone who's maybe been chronically dieting, or they really don't know where to go next. And I'm like, hey, I think you're in a good position to actually work up your food and reverse diet and taper down all the cardio activity. And that's new and scary to some people. So it's really, that's where open-mindedness comes in. It's like, hey, we could try this out. I think personally, from my professional opinion, it'll work for you and show us a lot of benefits. But that's part of, I think, a moving part here that I think is going to get you to where you want to be.
For sure. And there's certain things, again, this goes back to what we said in one of the earlier parts, like, all right, based on all of the what's going on in your check-in for these past few weeks, there's something really negative with digestion, right? Or again, training or whatever it may be, or mindset. It's like, all right, let's try this thing, or why don't we give this a go, or why don't we take that out, or why don't we add this in? And it's like, if the person's never done that before, it can be really, really scary. And for example, so I really don't advocate for any elimination diets besides a low FODMAP protocol for specific clients. And if somebody's having really, really bad gut issues, it's one of the most studied elimination diets, and it's the best studied thing actually for IBS. But anyways, it's a Monash, Monash, was at the university. Anyways, so that's something that's like pretty extreme and not something that I recommend obviously for most people. But if a client is in a situation where I think it would help them, it's like, okay, we gotta be open-minded here. I know this is not ideal. This is not something that I want us doing forever, but why don't we try this? And then, if best case scenario, we learn some stuff. Worst case, it was a waste of a few months, but it's not really going to harm you.
No, it'll show us anything. It should show us more, if anything. So.
Exactly. So there's just, sometimes we all get caught up in our like, I've been doing this, I like this, it works. And at some point, you have to do things that are good and are easy for you, because otherwise you're not going to stick to them, right? Like you've made them habitual. But there are certain things that you have to be willing to change if there's an issue. And you're like, oh, well, there's this issue, and it keeps coming every single week. And then the coach is saying, all right, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we add this? Why don't we take this away? Why don't we whatever? And you're like, no, I don't really want to do that. All right, well, you're probably still going to have that same issue then. If you don't want to change your sleep hygiene, you're going to have bad sleep.
Yeah.
And then that's going to affect everything else.
Yeah. You don't want to change, your meal timing or fix, that feeding window. You may still have issues with whatever you're bringing up to me. So it's all about trial and error.
Yeah, and again, that open-mindedness of, all right, we're gonna, it's not gonna be a whole overhaul, but if somebody's having specific pointed issues, which again, having a questionnaire and a check-in that fills in all those blanks, okay, what's going on, it kind of makes like a whole picture of their week, then we can have a better idea. So being open-minded is incredibly important for being coachable, as well as just kind of having a baseline level of trust. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is effort.
Yeah. So
good old effort.
Good old effort. Part of this process is, of course, you having a plan and executing that plan. So we cannot be there to hold your hand. We can't, force you to do anything. Really, I can't.
Remember, we don't.
I can't, sit on your shoulder and make sure you're tracking your macros or hitting those macros to begin with. So part of this is on the client and making sure that they're actually implementing the plan that they're given. That's a really big part of this. I can give you a plan, I can give anyone a plan, but it's not going to do anything unless we put it into work.
And that's where good coaching practices come in, of course. If somebody, say you're like, all right, here's where I think we should start. Somebody's not executing on it. All right, well, let's change this.
Yeah.
But regardless of what we change or what we do, on our end, we still need that effort on the client's end. And pushing clients in general is something that's incredibly important with coaching. And you have to, this is where that nuance of coaching comes in. And it's understanding that you can't just, go full throttle with certain people right off the bat because they might not be ready for it. But likewise, some people might, need you to kind of slowly ease in, or they might need a little bit of a kick. Not everybody, like, you can't go totally hard with some people, and then you also can't just be like totally soft with other people. Then you have to push them, and that's again where that kind of nuance of coaching.
Figure out as you learn the client and learn, where they're coming from, their experience, all that stuff.
Yeah, and those things will present themselves usually in the beginning, not always, but usually in the beginning. And then you kind of learn people's personality, and you learn their communication style, and you learn what they like and what they don't like and how they respond. And, half of coaching is just saying something in a different way until it clicks for someone.
Yeah.
You might not even be changing the message per se, but you're just changing how you say it. But pushing clients is incredibly important. And I would say that over the years, we have a really, really great client retention because that's our goal. We don't want to just have new clients all the time. We want to have, we do want new clients, but we want to work with the same clients for a long period of time so we can actually make effective changes. But the one thing that I would say over time that has pushed people away
is pushing the client.
Is pushing them. And it's doing things that are very uncomfortable or what they deem that they don't need.
And this can span over so many different goals too, whether it's the untracked meals or the method, the reverse diet, or anything really. It applies to a lot of different clients, and it sucks that happens, but I feel like that's the common denominator in a lot of those client relationships that haven't gone long term.
That is the main one. It's pushing somebody. And of course, I make so many mistakes, and maybe initially, early on, I've made mistakes of, okay, maybe I did push too hard. Maybe that was an inappropriate coaching method. And of course, nothing was, unhealthy or unsafe. But okay, maybe I should have changed how I said that or whatever. So learning from that is important, but also not being afraid as the coach to say, okay, no, I'm firmly planting my flag in this. I'm very flexible in certain things, but there's certain aspects. It's like, all right, no, like this requires change. This requires help. This requires outside help. Whatever it might be, and feeling confident in that because you understand that, okay, this is to better them. They might not see it yet, but this is for the betterment of them, and not just fitting into their own neuroses and saying what they want to hear. It's incredibly important. So
as coaches, if we just tell the client what they want to hear and not what they need to hear, we're doing you a disservice.
That's not coaching. That's
just a yes man.
And somebody is venting their problems to you, and you're going, oh yeah, sure, and then you just
keep doing what
you keep doing, and they're just holding it. They're a little cheerleader. That's not what we do. Certainly, there's some days where it's like, vent. People tell us everything. We are the cheerleader, we are the therapist, we are the
friend,
the life coach, we're the friend. Like, we're the everything to people, but we're also ultimately the coach. So when it's like, all right, this needs to change, or this is where I'm putting my foot down because this is unhealthy for you in the long term, that's where you have to as a coach be okay with that, and as the client going into it saying, okay, if I trust this person and we have good communication and they've been willing to adjust those other things, they certainly seem like they really want to have this in here. It must be for a reason. Let me just give it a try. As long as it's not unsafe, of course, which we would never recommend. But for other people listening who are obviously not working with us, don't just blindly follow somebody and it be an unsafe recommendation. But if it's something that maybe just feels uncomfortable to you or is pushing you in a certain way, it's important to go, all right, maybe there's a reason for this.
Like, maybe this is really what I need to get where I'm going.
If all the other boxes are checked.
Oh, yeah.
Not if it's some other crazy thing. But yeah, so I think that kind of covers it. Like I said, a lot of them are intertwined, and but they are all unique in their own way. So it's just really important if you're trying to get the most out of any kind of coaching situation. And once again, this goes for not just our type of coaching. This can go for everything in life. Any kind of relationship that you have, any, mentos,
mentees, mentors.
Any kind of mentos you have. So, as always, thank you guys for listening. If you have any feedback for us, please let us know. And as you guys might have noticed, we've really, really put effort into the podcast. This is actually episode 1, 2, 3. We're so proud. Jill is so salty that we never celebrated episode 100.
We're 23 episodes late on that. And I don't know
she
how to
wanted
process.
like a 100 episode thing, and then we just kind of flew by it. And
well, I was totally thinking about something else just now, like how we say goodbye. I said howdy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's the goodbye for howdy? Is there a goodbye for that, or I just stumped you, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't like these curveball questions. Is there a goodbye to howdy?
Well, now I'm just back on the fact that we didn't celebrate 100 episodes.
Yeah,
so
she's just so upset. So, in any case, we've really been putting a lot of effort into the podcast, so all support is appreciated. Shares, tags, subscribe, reviews, all of that.
10 stars.
And we also have articles every week on our site. Long form content is what we enjoy. Mm-hmm. So whether it's writing articles or it's doing podcasts, it's definitely what encapsulates us more as a team and what we represent as coaches. So we are trying to do more on here, as you guys probably noticed. So again, any support is appreciated, and yeah, that's all for now. We'll catch you guys
next time.
But no, okay. Bye. If anybody knows the goodbye to howdy, let us know.